how to increase drive, how to increase toy drive, how to increase engagement. So everything kind of going along those lines. So I'm going to cover that in a little bit more detail now. So first of all, drive is something that a dog, an animal, inherently wants to do or needs to do. It is a need to fulfill a very strong desire. So for instance, we have prey drive. We've got food drive. That's something that a lot of dog trainers talk about. Sex drive, pack drive, a bunch of these inherent desires to fulfill a specific need. So without going into too much detail as to what drive is, if we as dog trainers talk about drive in general, meaning the dog wanting to do something, and therefore how do I increase that? So how do I make that dog want to engage more in that? Boiling it down to specific examples that were brought up, let's say ball drive. How do I increase ball drive? How do I increase toy drive? If your dog is the type of dog that doesn't have a whole lot of ball drive or prey drive or toy drive, whatever we're going to call it, then it might just be a genetic tendency for this dog not to have that drive. There are certain things that you can do to increase that drive, but ultimately, if you have a dog that just loves to chase the ball or a rag or anything, it does that because it was genetically bred to do that. So if the dog has the genetics to have that insane prey drive, that's how it is. Nobody did anything about it. There wasn't a trainer or an owner that necessarily increased that particular drive. What happened was genetically this dog came into the world with that very high drive, that high desire to chase that toy. A dog that has very little or none of it, or very little of it, I should say, you can only do so much. So here are some things that you can do. And I'm going to talk a little bit about establishing operations. I know it's a little bit of a fancy term, but an establishing operation is just an event that changes the value of a particular thing, of a reinforcement. For example, let's use food for a moment. If I have a dog that doesn't have a whole lot of food drive, I can change the value of that particular treat, of that particular toy, by doing a few things, right? But whether it's by accident or whether it's intentional. And these are the three things that boil down to when it comes to establishing operations. And that is satiation, deprivation, and motivation. So satiation, deprivation, motivation. So if the dog in that particular example doesn't have a whole lot of food drive and I want to increase that food drive, I can use deprivation to increase the value of that food drive. Let's say this dog, instead of eating 3 meals a day, it eats 1 meal a day. And the other 2 meals I make up for by feeding the dog with my hands. So if I'm going to do some treat training and I want that food drive to increase, I'll use a little bit of deprivation, meaning instead of the dog eating 3 meals a day, I'll only eat 1 meal a day, and then the rest he gets while it's training. So that deprivation can automatically increase the value of that food. So if I look at toy drive, I can do the same thing. If your dog has very little toy drive and it has some toy drive, some ball drive, but you want to see more of it, provided that you have the right genetics, that's one thing that you can do to increase the value of the toy, is to deprive the dog of these toys for a period of time. It might be a day, a couple of days, a few days, sometimes a week. I have seen dogs that they go a couple of weeks without playing at all, and that's whether they're recovering from an injury or whatever, or they were boarded, and then after 3 weeks or a few days of not playing, they come out and they play, and they're insane. Their drive has increased so much through deprivation. So if you want to increase toy drive on a dog, you can do that through deprivation. Satiation will actually change the value in the opposite direction. So if you want a dog to have more ball drive, then maybe don't have it play with toys constantly. Don't let it have it as a freebie where it just gets to reward itself throughout the day, because then when you train and you go, hey, let's play with this ball, let's have you earn this ball, the dog might just look at that and go, I don't need to earn it, I get it, 23 the other 23 hours of the day. So satiation will change the value of that ball in the opposite direction, right?